All right. Welcome to the Mechanic to Millionaire podcast show number two.
Number two. Good morning.
That's brings back a lot of memories.
Yeah, it does. Turn my light on.
So we're gonna keep these to a half hour, is what we decided, just for YouTube's sake and keeping people's interest, and seems to be about the right amount of time. So it'll be an ongoing process, and we just won't try to get it all in one show.
Yeah,
Share my screen, which is really hard to do because once you get going, you don't want to stop. So
especially with both of us because we like to elaborate. So
yeah,
we'll do
yeah,
our best.
going to take a lot of discipline. So we'll see how we do. All right. So let's just start with the forward and see what we can come up with as far as what his purpose of the book is and what he's wanting to accomplish. In the present volume, I have endeavored to set before the reader the conception of a sequence of creative action commencing with the formation of the globe and culminating in a vista of infinite possibilities attainable by everyone who follows up the right line for their unfoldment. When I read something like that, like when we're reading, we want to make sure we're trying to extract from each sentence the important point that is written down, because there's a lot more behind just the words on the page. And so, like, reading slowly and methodically and giving some kind of critical thinking. Um, but we also want to do that in a fashion, if we're doing this personally for ourselves in our own study time, or whether on a podcast like this, we don't want to drag it out too far and go too far down, a rabbit hole. But we do want to stop and take some time to critically think, which is there's a shortness of critical thinking out there for the individual. And so let's just try and develop that habit and kind of hold that out as an example as we go through this as well. So the thing that stands out for me here is the right line. Well, what's the right line to get unfoldment and to obtain the infinite possibilities for me in my life? That means that anything that I can dream of, my highest, grandest version, my ideal life, what does that look like with no holding back? Like, nobody knows but me. And what is that infinite possibility for me? And it sounds like there's something that we need to follow, like we need to be obedient to, or we need to get in line with. Like, that's going to be the thing that's the catalyst for me to experience that ideal life. What is that? That's what I want to know. How do I unfold that? And so that would really grab my interest for what he's going to be saying, further on in this forward and also throughout the book, because that's what everybody wants, is to be able to live their ideal life. And he's saying right here, I'm going to put together some things that will string that out and help you to gain insight to that. Anything you want to add?
I was just looking up the word vista because to me it's like this, I don't know, etherical word. Um, with what I think I know the definition, but I wasn't sure. So it's interesting because the third definition is the one that I was thinking it meant as a far-reaching mental view. So all of the infinite possibilities. But the first definition and the second one like add a new way of thinking, or it adds to the way I think, because it's a view or a prospect, especially one seen through a long, narrow avenue or passage, as between trees or houses. And the second one is such an avenue or passage, especially when formally planned. So what I'm getting from that is a vista isn't just a bunch of things. I mean, it is a bunch of possibilities, a far-reaching mental view, and it also has a certain focus and a plan that goes along with it to bring out those possibilities. So I just thought that was pretty.
That's a good point to bring up,
Yeah.
because we don't, that highest, grandest version for me back 17 years ago was just being able to enjoy the simple things of life. Me and you going out on a nice date, to dinner and a movie, excuse me, I just got done with a bike ride and it was really cold and windy. And anyway, the that ideal life back then, there was a focus, like there were already wants that I had that I was focused on, being able to afford new clothes for the kids instead of waiting for hand-me-downs or, the perfect sell, or the stars to align just right so that we could get them some new clothes. And that might be an extra job and, in between having to pay certain bills right now, like everything aligned just right so that we could do that thing, which was very few and far between, and in those simple enjoyments of life. And so those were the focuses that I had in the beginning, and always looking for something that I could make happen for those opportunities to be, accomplished. And then as we started learning these principles and these laws that actually help us to see the end before the beginning, like you can see the result based on your actions, and you could set that result to whatever you wanted it to be, we started to accomplish those things. And I kind of like refer to that as going from one magnificent win to the next. And so we started doing that as we learned these principles. And then that's an evolving process. So the one vistas that were, there was a multiple vistas that were right in front of me. The car wasn't the best car. I was always having issues, and good thing I was a mechanic, right? And then not not being able to take the vacations we wanted to take. So those were the immediate vistas. But after we had reached those and continuing to maintain those, now that was a standard operation in our lives. Like we could buy, the clothes that we needed at any time. We could take whatever vacations we wanted to. Those vistas open up and they become bigger. And what we didn't see before now comes into our viewpoint. And it's a really cool process on, I think it was Bentino said, what's next? And that's the thing that pushes us to keep growing and keep that unfoldment process going, which is going to take more personal growth. But yeah, I like those definitions.
Yeah. The longness of that definition is, the what's next part, because you have a row of houses or trees or the space between them. You get to the one tree, and then what's next, and it just keeps going. So I like that.
And that's that kind of, Bob Proctor talks about that too, like his grandmother, who he respected and loved. She said she looked very wise, but she was wrong. I should be satisfied, is what she said. I should be satisfied with what I got. He said, no, I should be grateful for what I got, but never be satisfied. And really, we never really are satisfied. There's always something more that we want when we accomplish our goals. And again, that is that unfoldment that pushes us for further development, to be able to reach that next thing. So when we reach that, and we do need to do that as we learn these principles, and something that's going to continue to motivate us for that continual personal growth and investment in our character and personality, is that have that very far off distance, highest, grandest version, like it's like a fantasy. And then you have your immediate goals and things that you're focusing on that you would really like to enjoy, like right now. Like that would be the ultimate. But first, I would like to have this in my life. And I think some people put that far off, grandiose vision way out there, and they bring that up close instead of hitting the little milestones on the way to that, highest, grandest version. So it is a balancing process, and there's wisdom in that and intelligence into setting yourself up for the wins and ultimately reaching that end. Okay. Yeah. Anything else?
Uh, no, just rabbit holes. We'll stay on the.
Yeah.
Uh,
I have endeavored to show that starting with certain incontrovertible scientific facts, all these things logically follow, and that therefore, however far these speculations may carry us beyond our past experience, they nowhere break the thread of an intelligible connection of cause and effect. So, and I like how he says, I think he says it a little bit here, is that speculation, there's always speculation when you're pushing into the unknown, but you have the reasoning ability, you have memory, you have examples of people who may have, trodden that path before us successfully. But if it's into a field that's completely unknown, kind of like these principles, when we're first being introduced to them, there's some speculation, but that's normal. That's a normal part of growth, is that speculation and not a sure knowing and the facts being revealed to us before. And that's how we progress and reach breakthrough into new eras and new discoveries that enhance our experience. So just know that as we go through this, there may be some like questioning as we bring up some of these principles that maybe you've never thought about or contemplated on before, or never been exposed to. But that's a natural process, that not knowing and that unassurance, is that the right word? Not having the assurance. That's a normal process of discovering something new. And then through testing it out and what we say, playing at 100% and really making agreements with it and just seeing how it plays out, then that speculation tends to become less and less, and we gain more of a knowledge around the facts of it.
I heard a quote this morning by a Neil A. Maxwell, and it says, doubting can either strengthen or weaken our faith, depending on our level of meekness. And how that goes along with what you just said, as we go along and there's new ideas, maybe even seem to contradict a reality that you've lived your whole life, reality in quotes, it might feel like doubt. There might be some level of like, I don't believe that, that is true, and so we can doubt. Doubting is actually a healthy thing, because that brings up questions in our mind that then allows us to pursue, these infinite possibilities of incontrovertible facts that we didn't know about, as long as we're meek and willing to be open to exploring. So it's not wrong to doubt. But if there's that pride that goes along with it, is like, I haven't heard what you've said before, or I doubt, what you're saying, and therefore I'm closed and I'm not going to listen, then you can miss out on the blessings or the circumstances, consequences, the positive consequences that go along with some of these truths that you just hadn't been exposed to before. So again, doubting can either strengthen or weaken our faith, depending on our level of meekness. I really like that.
Yeah, I was just going to make a note here so I didn't forget. But staying in that safe place is not what we want to do, right? We don't want to stay in that safe place. And they say the greatest growth is, when we start to feel uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And it goes right along with that. And the meek shall inherit the earth. And meek is courageous, but it's also submissive and like a child. They're willing to submit to things that are being taught to them. And in the right environment where truths are being taught, that's a huge advantage. And for somebody to be meek would be somebody that not only would listen and agree, but then they put their life in alignment with it. And so that's why the meek are going to inherit the earth. It's not that you're a child and you're helpless and you need somebody to defend you. Meek is also very courageous because it gets out of that safe place and it's willing to explore and test things out. And again, in the right environment where truth is being taught, but the person who's meek hadn't been exposed to that truth yet, they'll embrace it and they'll put it into action. They'll put their lives in harmony with it. And that's going to create an incredible amount of progress, because imagine feeling uncomfortable, but you receive the truth and then you put your life in alignment with it and start to adopt it and adapt to it. That's going to create some incredible progress, especially in an environment where truth is king.
Yeah, and it creates, actually, ironically, a greater sense of safety.
That's right.
Safety is not a bad thing, but staying in a safe place, scientifically, safety is a relational variable, and it can only be had with risk. And being open to taking risks to expand our comfort zone, to do the things that feel counterintuitive or that feel, out of that alignment with our brain's job is to keep us safe. But it thinks there is a lot of things that aren't safe that truly are. So we have to be willing to take the risk in order to find the true safety that then leads to a greater sense of trust, and even leads to a greater sense of love and belonging in this world and in your relationships and within yourself as well. So it's kind of a cool concept. And it's also, I kicked and screamed at that thought for a really long time. I'm like, I don't want to get out of my safe place. I don't want to take that risk. I want to stay safe, but it's not safe in that safe place. You have to find safe by risking and being open and meek, being willing to do that. So,
Yeah, and there's steps that we can take as individuals to do that in a way that is doable. And fear comes from the unknown. And as one of the things that I would think I'd throw out here for the listener, especially if you're just starting on this journey, but for anybody, we could always do better. So when people hear about these principles, it actually puts greater responsibility on the individual to start applying those principles, knowing that they're going to get results in their life that they may have thought in their paradigm and in their upbringing that was God's role. God was supposed to bring those things into my life. And it was solely based on his opinion and when he thought I was ready or whatever the case might be, however we've shaped that up in our minds. But what we'll find is that God has given us everything we've ever prayed for already. We just have to do our part. So the principles teach us what our part is. It doesn't take God out of it, but that will create an uneasiness for people when their paradigm and their belief system is, no, God's totally in control of my life 100%. Whatever results I'm going to get, it's going to be based on what God wants to give me. And to be honest, that's not how it works, guys. And you'll actually, that might, like exactly what you were just saying, that might cause some fear and some uncomfortableness that we're not familiar with, that holds us back. But when we step into it, as I started learning these principles, I found that it actually gave me greater assurance, greater confidence in myself, but also in God. And it grew my relationship closer to God, gave me greater peace, greater confidence, greater joy, greater harmony than I had before with the other belief that, no, God's in charge of everything. God's will be done in every single minute thing in my life. And that's just not how it works. God doesn't want that kind of control over your life. He wants to bless you, and he's already given you everything you need to be blessed. We just have to do our part. And the principles, again, show us what we need to do, and that will test some people. It's going to take them out of their safe place. But once we do it, that's a feeling that switches pretty quickly, right? Once we start doing it, we start to get the results, and we feel more harmony in our lives and all of these good things that we're looking for.
a lot of us will take that, well, it doesn't feel good to me. It feels uncomfortable. So it must not be God's will. That must be the sign that God doesn't want me to do this. And that's, again, I mean, it makes sense because, if we're following God's will, then we should feel good. Yeah, eventually, on the other side of it, but that discomfort is not a sign very often from God that it's the wrong thing to do. It's just your brain telling you, this is new, this might not be safe, so be careful. It's on the other side of that. If it still feels horrible, or if it still, isn't producing the results, then maybe you can look back at it. But on the other side of fear feels really good, and it's expanding. It doesn't mean it feels good as you're going through it all the time. Actually, most of the time, it doesn't feel good as you're going through it until you've gotten so used to the way that feels that you know what's coming on the other side. And so we have to trust that our brains and our what we're used to gets in the way too. It's not all just God. Nope, can't do that. It feels uncomfortable. Go back. That's not the way it works. Most of the time, that's our own wiring. It's our own realities that are small in the beginning. Then they have to expand, and we have to perpetuate that expansion by being willing to risk.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that are flooding in my mind right now. And one of the things is paradigms are really strong, you guys. Paradigms are physical as well, and they create chemical peptides in our within us physically, within our physical anatomy, and those create emotions. And so if our paradigm is set in a certain way, but it's false, when we go to change that, you're going to feel that uncomfortableness, and it's gonna feel like it's not coming from you because we don't understand. I really feel like we're going to have some great stuff coming from Carrie, verbally and verbiage wise, based on her psychology and understanding of the brain. But there's real chemical reactions that happen that try to keep us safe, but they're not keeping us safe. That's just built into the way our physical anatomy works. And so when we know that, that uncomfortableness actually becomes a part of the journey that we're expecting. And just as an example, like when you have a child, we've raised 5 kids, and I've done this a lot with them. And we used to do it at Carrie's mom's house, where they would be at the top of the stairs, and I would have them jump to me at the bottom of the stairs. And that first couple times, there was a real uneasiness to them, and they were like scared, and there was fear and untrust and not knowing what was going to happen. But then they stepped into that fear and they leaped, and then I'd catch them. And it got to a point where like Mackenzie would just take a full-on run and just fly through the air like Superman all the way down the stairs. But that first time is really uneasy. Now, that's not based on true principles and them feeling the uneasiness, but it's the same parallel. That fear that could overtake us and prevent us from doing something, when in this case she loved it, but the first time she didn't love it, there was a fear. And so if you can kind of understand what I'm trying to explain here, there's the same process to that in changing our paradigms as we literally learn truths that should make us feel good, but sometimes in the beginning they don't, because our paradigms are set up and they're wired in a certain way. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Let's see, we have 10 more minutes. So
along with principle is not bound by precedent, that's highlighted. So all the
that precedent could totally keep you bound, and that's what we want to overcome. And there's a sense of reasoning within us too. When we learn principles and we're asking you to do a certain thing, or the principles are asking us to do a certain thing, we can reason out in our mind, like, is that going to harm anybody? Is that going to cause, any kind of danger or put me in some kind of situation that isn't going to be healthy for me? And we can kind of reason that out through the principle. Even though the principle may be suggesting to us to do something else and look at something in a different way, we can reason out beforehand, hey, is this dangerous? And if it's not, then let's test it out and see if it works and start to apply it. I love that. I love that phrase right there. Principle is not bound by precedent. Let's just read a few more things here and we'll start to wrap it up. But I think this is a really good start off to the podcast in helping people to be familiar with that uncomfortableness. Rod Harrison calls it the deception phase. Everybody's going to go into the deception phase as you work to improve and grow. Otherwise, there would be no room. I mean, you wouldn't need to improve and grow, right? And so through the process of improving and growing, you're going to have to take on some perceptions that you don't already have. And that causes what's called the deception phase. There's no way around it. There's no way, under it or over it. You have to go through that. And as you do this enough, like Carrie did with school, she knew, I just got to go through this. And it didn't stop her actions. It might cause you to cry. It might cause you to have fear. It might cause you to have even some anxiety as you push through that. But that doesn't last very long. On the other side of that, as you're even going through it, it starts to feel good. But there is a real feeling that wants to hold people back. And that's what paralyzes most people. They stop before they even start because of that feeling.
One of my mentors says all the time, and it's something that I still personally lean on when I'm feeling the discomfort of doing something differently than I've habitually been doing it, whether that's with relationships or stepping into my position now as a professional. It's scary, but he always says healthy feels good, and healthy is the same as principle. There is a science that in a lot of things, there's a science that tells us what healthy relationships look like and what is healthy and what isn't. There's a science that tells us, what healthy nutrition and what health, physical health looks like. There's a principle that tells us what, lots of different, like the 10 commandments or principles, the law of vibration, all of these principles that tell us what healthy looks like. And if we're moving toward healthy, because we have the principle there, we have that stake in the ground that doesn't move because it's been proven and it's been shown and it's true. It might feel uncomfortable getting there, but when you get there, healthy always feels good, even if it's different. And that's how you can tell, am I heading toward Is this feeling leading me to a dangerous place or not? Because it might feel like danger to do something differently. If you've been in a situation, in a relationship. I just worked with a couple on Saturday, a new couple, and they both had these ideas of what it was supposed to feel like. And that feeling was keeping them toward going to, or is keeping them toward going toward a healthy thing. And so just showing them what healthy looks like, and then helping them navigate through those feelings of like, this doesn't feel right to me. It doesn't feel good to me. Being willing to have a conversation when it feels unsafe because, you've learned through your life that if you bring things up, you get yelled at or you get attacked or whatever. It's not safe. I'm not going to do it. But when you learn, okay, but it's healthy to have this conversation, then on the other side of that, it feels good. And just trusting principle is right and right feels good. Healthy feels good. And I'm going to go through discomfort sometimes to get there. So anyway.
Yeah, and we're gonna encourage you, invite you, and coerce. No, I'm not just kidding. To set goals and to set and then through the principles, as we extract the principles from this book, you're gonna see exactly how you can get from point A to point B through the clarification of these principles and becoming aware of them. It's kind of like when you're a child, you're just riding in the car with the parents and you get from point A to point B, and you don't understand all of the principles that they're following. You have the signals, the lights, the stop signs, all of the signs. You have the lanes that suggest to you, not suggest, they command to you where to stay within, and the red light, comes on, or the green light or the yellow light. And then you have, the yield signs and the stop signs and the speed limit signs. And all of those things the child's unaware of, but they're safely getting from point A to point B. Why? Because somebody else knows those principles, the parents, the one who's driving. And I remember becoming aware of like all of those things as I was getting my permit and my driver's license, and how it opened up a whole new world. And I had to like follow those principles, those laws, in order to be safe, to be healthy. And you could see how they work together. They don't limit you. They don't make you feel uncomfortable. They make you feel more comfortable. And as we bring these principles that are more abstract and more subtle, but very real, in fact, they're the most real principles of, creating the life that you want, that ideal life. When you start to see them, it's going to challenge you because we haven't operated under that paradigm before. But when you start to do it, it's going to be amazing. And I'm so excited to continue to get through the book. It's like, can we just get through it all right now? But no, we can't.
No, we can't.
It'll take some time.
Yeah, I was just laughing as you were talking about that because I literally can still feel how scary it was when my first time to go drive with the driver's ed teacher, because of all of those principles that had come into awareness of what driving means. And I'm like, I don't know if I can do all of that. Like, I don't know if I'm going to remember to signal, and what if I push on my gas instead of my brake? And that it just was making me laugh because that's exactly what it is. We see somebody living the life that we want to have, and we look at some of the things they're teaching and we're like, but I don't know if I can do that. And so I don't know, maybe I just won't drive. Maybe I'll just have people drive me around or walk everywhere for the rest of my life. And no, because that's not going to give me the freedom that I wanted by being able to learn how to drive right. So got in the car, and it actually wasn't as hard as I felt like it was going to be. If I would have trusted my emotions, I still might not be driving today,
And there's a certain amount of people that don't get their license, and they kind of play it off like they don't want it, but maybe underlying that is their fear of trying to understand all of that stuff at once, and that paralyzing them. I don't know if that's the case, but I could see how there would be a percentage of people that just maybe have a fear of driving, and because of that, and so it holds them back. But they, on the surface, they wouldn't say that. They might feel that, they might even know that for themselves, but they're not. They're going to play it off. And we see a lot of people in life. I used to play it off, like come up with some kind of excuses or rationalization as to, why I'm not living my best life now, and trying to, on the surface, feel like we're in control. It's when we really admit 100%, that we take 100% responsibility for the things that are in our lives. And these principles help us to start to see how we can start to actually take that responsibility and start to apply it in a way that we get the results that we want in our lives. It's very powerful. It's very enjoyable to go through it. And it's also very enjoyable and satisfying to help other people to become aware of it.
It is. I just worked with a girl actually. She's 15 and she's at the point where she's driving with her mom. And that was one of her fear. Like one of the things that came up is she's like, I just don't want to drive. I don't know if I want to get my license, but my mom's going to make me drive home. And she was so scared. And then after she came the next time, and probably 2 weeks after that, she's like, I can't wait to drive. It's so fun. I love it. So it was really cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how it's been with, teaching these principles as well, right? With other people. They're just like, wow, this is so awesome. I can't believe I didn't realize this before or see this before. Just like we went through ourselves. Well, we're at the time, so we'll just make a little mark right here where we left off, this speculative,
Yeah.
so there's going to be some speculation and some things that come up that, are going to challenge you, and that emotional, chemical reaction. Just know that that's natural, and to just stay in there, just don't quit. Just keep checking in, and we'll keep providing the podcast and as much information as we can. And I really believe there's going to be a lot that comes out that's really revealing for people. So any last thoughts before we jump off?
No, I just like to use purple.
Which one is your favorite color?
Favorite
All right,
color.
you guys. We'll see you on the next show. Bye, everyone.